it's just the arrow keys.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Equestrian Queensland webinar on managing anxiety to improve performance. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. To the right of your screen you'll see there's a little window pane. If you've got any questions, just type in there and they will come through to us. We're very lucky to have Damien Stewart from Room 23 Sports Psychology with us this evening to give the webinar. Those of you that are viewing this live will be able to see Damien and myself. If you're watching the recording that will be made available, you won't see us, but you should hear our voices and see the screen. So I will hand over to Damien. He has prepared a handout for you all, and that will be emailed out to you all tomorrow and be made available on our website as well with the recording. So I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Greetings everybody, my name's Damien Stewart. Thank you for having me tonight. This is the first for me to do a webinar, so hopefully you can all see me okay and hear me okay. If not, send a message through to Christine and she'll get us sorted out. So we've got quite a lot to get through tonight. As Christine said, there is a handout that will be sent out to you tomorrow. So that's mostly about the strategies for managing anxiety at the end. So we'll get started. I didn't know whether people would... That arrow didn't work.
That was a bit slow to start off with last time.
Excuse us for a second. There we go. Sorry about that. So there's a photo of me. I didn't think you guys would actually get to see me on the screen, but that's me there. I'm a psychologist and what's called a Sport and Exercise Psychology Registrar. So I'm working through a registrar program and almost finished that. Prior to psychology, you can see there I was a police officer for 19 years and I played some elite level sport and also coached some elite level sport. So tonight we're going to be talking about, first of all, a little bit of an introduction into what is sports psychology. It might be new to a few people, it might be something that a few people have used before. Then we're going to understand what anxiety and stress is in performance, where that comes from. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to manage that for getting performance out of ourselves despite the anxiety we might feel. So first of all, what I'd ask everybody to do, generally if there was a crowd here, I'd get a show of hands so everybody have a bit of a think about it. I want you all to have a think about how much of equestrian, how much of the actual type of equestrian that you do is how much of it is physical and how much of it is mental. So you'll get, the first one will say 100 and 0, so what that's representing is 100% physical and 0% mental. So when I scroll through, what I'd like you to do is have a think about which you think it is for equestrian. Do you think it's 100% physical, 0% mental, 90% physical, 10% mental, 80%, 20%, 70% physical, 30% mental, 60-40, 50-50, 40-60, 30-70, 20-80, 10-90, or 0 physical, 100% mental. Generally, when I've got people in front of me, we start getting hands at about 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, 40-60. And the actual answer to that question is there isn't actually an answer. But the point is that if we're an equestrian rider and we're looking at this and saying, I believe that when I'm performing, it's 60% physical and 40% mental, then the question I would ask you is, do you spend 40% of the time working on the mental side of your sport? And sometimes that's an interesting question for people to ponder. So what is sports psychology? An applied sports psychologist, which is me, there's also researchers, but an applied sports psychologist is a psychologist who assesses athletes and implements strategies pertaining to the mental aspects of sport. Pretty straightforward. A lot of people think, oh, now we've got a sports psychologist involved, now I've got to spend more time practicing. The point is that if we can learn and implement the sports psychology or the mental skills that we need for riding, if we can learn those and implement them into our performance, we will do it at practice with everything that we do. So if we're going to do a dressage run and practice that, we would use all our mental skills even in practice. It's not something that we do just on competition day. We do it every single time that we're going to execute that skill. So every time we're practicing the skill, we're practicing the mental side as well. As a sports psychologist, we have a bit of a mantra, which is our priority is always the person first. So we're a psychologist first. So we want to make sure that we take care of the well-being and the welfare of the person always first. Second, we'll look at the athlete, and third is performance. So that's the order we tend to look at things. When we're looking at sport performance, there's 4 aspects. One is the physical. And the physical aspect of sport is, do I have the ability to do it? Am I fit enough? Can I get out of my lounge chair? Can I get up on my horse? Those sorts of things. Do I have the physical ability to participate? Then we need the technical skills. Maybe we need some technical skills for doing dressage as compared to show jumping, as compared to eventing. Then we need strategy and tactics to be able to compete at the high level of sport. And then if we've looked at all those 3 and we've said, well, we're pretty good physically, we're pretty good technically, and I've got a pretty good tactical and strategic way of going about things, but I'm still not performing at the level that I want to, then maybe it's the mental side of things. So if we're looking to improve performance, we need to probably look at these 4 aspects of sport at any one time. So after we've looked at the welfare of the athlete, made sure the person's okay, the athlete's okay, then we start looking at the concept of performance. And what I'm trying to do here with showing this beautiful car is that this is a high performance car bought straight off the shelf, basically. So, you know, good brakes, good wheels, good engine, good suspension, very comfortable. It's a pretty high performing car. So we might look at people before the sports psychologist gets involved and say, that's what you are, high performing, you're doing really, really well. So my goal is to take you from something like this to something like this, which is the same car, upgraded engine, upgraded brakes, better suspension, built for speed, built to perform a little bit better than the one before. So hopefully that gives a bit of a picture of, we don't necessarily need to bring the psychologist in when there's something wrong. Sometimes it's just to enhance performance is what we're looking at. So we do work all the way along the spectrum from people who are distressed, athletes that are distressed, all the way through to improving performance, enhancing performance. So that's kind of what our job is. And we're quite unique in Australia because we're the only sports psychologists in the world that are trained as psychologists first and sports psychologists second. So what is it we're trying to achieve by bringing in sports psychologists or working on the mental side of our game? What we're looking for is excellence in performance. That's what we're looking for. Notice I didn't say having to win all the time, having to be perfect. We're looking to get excellence out of our performance. And each of us will have a different definition for what that is, and depending on what level we're at most likely. So a couple other ways I like to look at what performance is and what we're trying to get, which is a relentless pursuit of uncompromising standards. We're also looking at giving 100% effort 100% of the time, and knowing that each time you walk or ride out of the arena, you gave your all. That's what we're hoping for when we're talking about excellence in performance. On the screen at the moment is just a small amount of the things that sports psychologists can help people with. On the left there, we have the on-field or in the arena stuff, focus, attention, concentration, goal setting, imagery, mental toughness, motivation, all the way on the other side to off-field stuff with injury management, communication, relationships and conflict, planning, sleep difficulties, travel is a big one in sport, sport-life balance type of things, etc., etc. So I'm going to move on pretty quickly from there and get on to understanding anxiety. I don't know if anybody would have any questions about what I've just gone through about what is sports psychology. No? We'll move on. So now we're going to talk about understanding anxiety and stress in performance. So I found this on the net, thought it was pretty funny, and people might actually relate to that if they've got young kids. So what is it that we're talking about here? Energy or activation? That's what we're talking about. To be able to perform in sport, we need a certain level of energy or motivation to be able to perform at our best. We call this activation. It's called a number of different things: energy, activation, all those sorts of things. And any time energy can be anywhere from low, basically when we're asleep or in a coma, all the way through to extreme excitement. Our brains never switch off, so our level of activation will always go up and down throughout the day. Activation energizes us, giving our body the oomph it needs to perform intensely and vigorously. We're going to have a bit of a diagram of that in a minute. So there's two distinct ends of the scale or the spectrum when it comes to activation. One is underactivation with Kobe there, having to sleep on the bench, and that's detrimental to performance. And then we've got the guy at the bottom there who's had too many coffees and he's overactivated, and that is also detrimental to performance. So looking at the anxiety performance bell curve, what you can see here is what I've just talked about in a diagram. So on the vertical axis, we've got performance, and the higher we go, the better the performance. The lower we go, the poorer the performance. And on the horizontal axis, we've got activation. So to the left is low activation, to the right is high activation. So we can see down in the corner where the two lines come together, that's where we're talking about people are in a coma or they've fallen asleep. No activation, no performance. So then we kind of get up in the morning, stretch our legs, throw some water in our eyes, have some breakfast, and our level of activation starts to increase along the horizontal line. But what you see is as that starts to rise along the horizontal line, as the activation starts to get higher, our performance tends to increase as well, until we get to the top where we've got the arrow saying maximal performance. So what we're talking about there is the zone of optimal performance. Maximum activation, maximum performance. So I'm right there, I'm ready, I'm energized, I'm all pumped up, I'm ready to go. But what happens when we start to talk about anxiety, which is what we're going to talk mostly about tonight, is when we start to come down the other side of the mountain or the other side of the bell curve, and we start heading to higher levels of activation. And as we can see, as we get higher in the activation, our performance starts to decrease. So this is when we're starting to talk about high anxiety. This is where it's actually problematic, not just the nerves or the jitters before we compete. What we're starting to talk about as we come down the other side is the concepts of choking and getting the yips and things like that. And even though we've got a nice gradual curve going down, some believe that there's a point along that curve coming down where we drop off, like falling off a cliff. We might call that the anxiety cliff that we fall off of. And obviously, more anxiety, or the worse anxiety, the worse the performance. So underactivation is a problem just as much as overactivation is, but generally overactivation is going to be more of a problem than underactivation. So just a quick word on if we weren't feeling quite up to it today, we want to stay in bed, we're not feeling that pumped up, then there's a few things that we can do to help us to get ready for performance. So listening to some music is a good way of pumping us up. Watching a hero or an idol perform is a good way of getting us in the mood. Watching a video of one of your own good performances is a great way to go. And getting some vigorous exercise to get our blood pumping and the adrenaline flowing is another way of getting us ready for performance. So overactivation or anxiety, what is it? So anxiety remains one of the most intensely researched areas of sports psychology. Assisting athletes to regulate their anxiety is pretty much the main thing that sports psychologists will do. So generally when you've got an athlete coming through your door, ringing you up to work with you, generally it's an issue of anxiety that's getting in the way that they want help with. And anxiety is the major reason why people come to see a sports psychologist. So anxiety, what is it? So it's a high level of activation that is often experienced as unpleasant. So most of us don't feel really anxious and think it feels good. Most of it feels unpleasant to us. It varies in how intense it feels, anxiety. It comes and goes depending on the situation. We don't necessarily have it all the time. It can feel intense, distracting, preoccupying, perhaps leads us to feel a little bit worried about what it is we're about to do. And the other thing about anxiety is we feel it emotionally and we feel it physically. Anxiety is normal. I think that's really important for us to talk about, and one of the key messages that I wanted to get across is when we're going to perform, anxiety is really normal. We get nervous, it doesn't feel comfortable, and we start to get concerned and worried about feeling anxious. I shouldn't feel this way, but it's actually quite normal to feel a certain level of anxiety. And it can also be beneficial to performance. If we look at the curve, and we found that zone of optimal performance where our activation was nowhere near zero, it was actually up in the middle range. The other thing to think about with anxiety, another way of putting it, thinking about it, is it's telling us something important is about to happen. I'm about to go out and compete. I'm about to go for a job interview, those sorts of things. So it is a really nice sign to us that something important is about to happen. However, excess levels of anxiety can lead to interfering with performance, reducing our enjoyment of our sport, and it can lead to us wanting to withdraw from our sport. So anxiety is our body's way of getting us ready for fight, flight, or freeze. We've probably all heard of the fight or flight syndrome, but now they've added freeze as well, which is we're talking about the deer in the headlights. Can't move. So what happens when we get anxious? We have an adrenaline dump, blood is pumped to the major muscle groups and the major organs. It's getting ready for action. Our gross motor movements, so moving like this, are enhanced, whereas our fine motor skills, say if we were going to try to thread a needle, are hampered by anxiety. We might get the jitters from the adrenaline. Now, and a lot of people think, oh, we shouldn't think negatively, we shouldn't feel anxious, but it's actually quite normal for us humans to feel a little bit cautious about the world. If we think back to when we were sort of living off the land and in caves, if we came out, we weren't as fast or as strong as the other animals, so we needed to be able to be ready for something that came. If we just sort of skipped through the jungle like Little Red Riding Hood, we would face being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something like that. So we're actually trained to be a little bit cautious. So another way of thinking about how anxiety is quite normal. So what does anxiety feel like? You can see it all there. We feel a racing heartbeat. We feel butterflies, and you can see this person, it's actually true, we do get butterflies. No, I'm just kidding. Cold and clammy hands. We can get trembling muscles. We might vomit, have a dry mouth, tense. Yawning is a big one. Not a lot of people think about that, and we'll get onto that a little bit more later. We might talk very fast. Maybe I'm doing that now if I'm feeling a little bit anxious. And we can have difficulty focusing when we're feeling anxious. So what to look for in athletes if you're coaching somebody or you have a child and you're trying to work out whether they're anxious or not, here's some things we can look for. So signs of distraction prior to performance, they're not listening to you when you're talking to them or somebody else. They're expressing more concern than usual. They usually, feel uncomfortable, but today it's really bad. Self-doubt about their performance, excess worry or crankiness, getting agitated, consistent discrepancy between practice and competition. So we're talking about they do it in practice and they do really, really well, do it really, really well in the warm-up, but then get out into competition and sort of don't do so well and they're not performing as well as they've shown you in the past when there's no pressure. We can look for a flushed face, red cheeks. Some people get it down into their neck and on their chest as well. Sweaty palms, dilated pupils. Look for pacing. They can't sit still. Fidgeting, yawning, and rapid speech. So the yawning is because when we start to get anxious, we start to sort of breathe very shallow, kind of like that, and therefore our body picks up we've got too much carbon dioxide in our body, we've not got enough oxygen in there, and it wants to expel the carbon dioxide. So why is anxiety a problem in sport? Well, it leads to some faulty decision making. We've talked about before, we're anxious, we might be distracted, we're not focused on what we need to be focused on to perform really, really well. You're going to hear the word focus a lot tonight when it comes to overcoming anxiety, and even although I've talked about how the main reason that athletes come to see a sports psychologist is for anxiety, the most important part of sports psychology or the most important mental skill is focus. If we're focused on the right things at the right time, we shouldn't get too anxious or the anxiety won't affect us as badly. Our muscles become tense, rigid, jerky and uncoordinated. We have unhelpful thoughts. I hope I don't mess up. So we start thinking negatively if we're anxious. Faulty attention and focus, which isn't going to help us. We might be focused on the wrong things at the right time. In equestrian, your horse will sense a level of anxiety and might become anxious as well. Now, I have to profess that equestrian is not a sport that I have much experience in, but the more I spend time with riders and around equestrian, the more I learn about how the horse really responds to the way the rider is feeling. So what leads to anxiety? What is it that causes us to feel anxious? Uncertainty of some outcome. So the more uncertain and out of control we feel, the greater level of anxiety. We're not sure what's going to happen. We're not sure, what people will think. Certainty of some outcome. I've done something wrong and someone's going to yell at me. That's another one that can cause anxiety. How in control we feel about the situation. The less in control we feel, the more anxious we feel. So conversely, the more in control we feel, the less anxious we will feel. And athletes who experience anxiety typically perceive that a situation is beyond their ability. So that might be real or not real, but they sense or they feel as though the situation is beyond their ability. So that can lead to anxiety. But mostly, being highly focused on what other people think of us in our performance, that is one of the greatest reasons for causing anxiety. And that could be our mum, our dad, a coach, a judge, a selector, anybody who's come to watch. If we go back to the 2012 Olympics, the greatest reason why athletes sought the help of the sports psychologist in the Olympic Village was that they couldn't sleep. And the reason they couldn't sleep was they were very anxious about what people were going to think of their performance the next day. So being highly focused on an outcome. This is a whole other webinar talking about motivation, intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. However, being focused on outcome, winning, beating an opponent, doing better than the other person, getting the trophy, these things cause anxiety. They take our focus away from what we're doing in the present moment and they put us into the future that we have no control over. So rather than those things, we want to be looking for being highly focused on our own processes and standards during performance and what we need to do to perform excellently. And we're going to talk more about this when I get to the actual tools that we have to overcome anxiety in performance. So what can lead to feeling anxious in equestrian? A big event, parents coming to watch, what do they think of me? Worrying about making a mistake or having made a mistake already, worrying that what my coach might say to me, good competition, so other riders who are at my level or perceived to be better, a selection event, decreased confidence, I haven't been going so well lately, so my confidence isn't really high right now. Negative self-talk, talking to myself very negatively, don't screw up, or you're hopeless, those sorts of things. And that's what can lead to anxiety. So now we're going to start looking at anxiety management, and I'll just check in with Christine if she's got any questions so far. No questions. Excuse me for having some water. Okay. So this is the important part of the night. This is how we manage anxiety. From here on, these are the things that are going to be in the handout that you get tomorrow. So they will follow the same order that I put them in here. So how do we manage anxiety for increased performance? So it's very important. Anxiety is essentially a state of mind in which we are worried about something that hasn't happened yet. If we think about it, anxiety is always future-oriented. We're always worried, even if we've done something wrong, waiting for the circumstances or the outcome of that still hasn't happened yet. So anxiety is always about the future. Therefore, the best way to cope with anxiety is to stay in the present moment as best we can and prepare for what is to come. The best way to stay in the present moment is focus on the process. So talked before about the importance of focus, and the next one is process. What is my process for executing this skill or this event? What is my process for riding my horse? That's what we're looking for. What is my process for getting my horse to do what it is that I want them to do? That's what we're talking about focusing on the process or what the process is. We want to stay in the present moment by following my routines. Am I following my game plan? Am I in the present moment? These are questions we want to ask ourselves if we're starting to get anxious or get off track. Am I focused on the right things? And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about the right things as we go. So the first thing I want to talk about, this is pre-performance routines. So pre-performance routines, some people might be really aware of them from other sports such as rugby league in Queensland. I'm from WA, so I'm an AFL fan. But we might look at Jonathan Thurston, the way he backs up from the ball when he's going to have a penalty shot. He moves his jaw, he moves his helmet, and he does the same thing every single time before he has a shot at goal. That's a pre-performance routine, a very obvious one. This is one of the most important things in sport. So what is a pre-performance routine? And just remember as well tonight that I'm talking very generally about routines. A routine is very individual to an athlete and requires a lot of work getting that right. to begin with. But a routine that works for one athlete is not necessarily going to work for another one. So what is a pre-performance routine? It's a sequence of task-relevant thoughts and actions which an athlete engages in systematically prior to his or her performance in a specific sport skill. So a routine is not the same as superstition, so getting out the same side of bed every day, or putting on my left sock before my right sock, or wearing my good luck underwear. That's superstition. That's not necessarily a pre-performance routine. And a routine is an active process. It's very deliberate, and it's aimed to get us ready and into the ideal state of mind to perform the event that we're about to perform. So why do we use routines? To create the optimal mindset to achieve the desired task. We talked before about the zone of optimal performance at the top of the bell curve. That's where we're trying to get ourselves to, as much close as possible every single time we perform. It's also to guide our attention towards the task at hand and remain focused on it. So rather than just getting out of the car when I rock up, get on the horse and just go and do my competition when I'm not really focused yet, getting everything in order starts to get us ready for the optimal mindset. So it starts to focus, if our focus is wide, and we're trying to bring our focus down to what we might call a fierce focus, which is right on the thing that I want to do. Consistency, it gives us the greatest chance of success in achieving a task at hand on a consistent basis. It gives us confidence and self-belief, has a side effect of reducing anxiety. The thing is, we're so focused on following our routine that we can't be focused, if we're doing it properly, we can't be focused on the things that are creating that anxiety. Well, I'm really focused on riding my horse and doing it well. I can't be worried about what the judge thinks. I can't be worried about what mum and dad thinks or what the coach thinks, technically. It also, we know that we've done it before in good performances, and because we've done it before and we've done it successfully, we know that it works for us. The routines are really for the days that we wake up and we're not feeling good, but we want to do them all the time. So the characteristics of a routine, they involve thoughts, mental processes, behaviours, what I do physically, mental skills, and they're always systematic. And it's suitable for closed skills, such as we perform in Equestrian. So what we mean by closed skills, nothing happens until I initiate it. That's what we're talking about. On a football field, when the ball is passed to me and then I have to pass it or I have to chase a ball against someone else, that's more of an open skill. But something like riding a horse is more of a closed skill. And they're relevant outside of the arena as well as they are in. For example, packing my bag the night before, making sure I've got everything on the day, how I saddle my horse, how I debrief afterwards or do my preparation after the event, my recovery. So the mental processes that are involved in routines, they're always task relevant. So this is why they're not about superstition. Superstition is just trying to reduce our anxiety, but task relevant is this is a task that I need to do to perform the skill that I'm about to perform in. Positive self-talk, we're going to get to positive self-talk and self-talk more a little later on. Process goals, thinking about what needs to be done, what strategy I'm going to follow based on what the desired outcome is. Controlled breathing, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well. We need task-focused triggers or cues. What is it that says to me, that gets me started, like a starter's gun in a running race? What is it that I say to myself that gets me moving? It might be like a command that you say to your horse. Visualization, we're going to talk about that as well a little bit later. And attentional focus, there's that word again, focus, 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 most important thing. The greatest athletes are those who focus on the right thing at the right time. So behavioural aspects of a routine, they're consistent, that is you do it exactly the same every single time you're going to execute that skill. There is a start and an end, and generally a start again. Gets the neuromuscular pathways firing. So as I'm thinking about the skill that I'm about to execute, even though I might not be waving my arm or actually riding the horse at the time, by thinking about it, the brain is sending signals to the muscles that actually perform that skill. So they're kind of getting activated even though we're not doing the skill. So we can see how that is getting us ready and into an optimal mental and physical position to execute that skill. What needs to be done physically to achieve the skill? So mounting the horse is a physical skill that needs to be done. Do I do it the same every single time? Getting myself ready for this performance. So systematic. Routines must be sequential in exactly the same order every single time. If you begin your routine and you get distracted or it's out of order, stop and start again. If it's possible. It's not always possible, but if we have the opportunity to start our routine again, if we get interrupted along the way, start again if you can. Routines are very individual processes, as I mentioned before, and athletes should have input into their routines rather than just be given to them. Do not deviate from your routine. Big mistake that people make when they start to get anxious is they start to go away from the thing that has caused them to be successful in the past. So a routine is only as good as our ability to adhere to it. So our routine must be within the rules of the sport. Say if there's a particular time frame, if we have 30 seconds to do a particular thing and our routine is 45 seconds, it's no good. It needs to be within the time frames required. Like any other skill, a routine takes time to get right. It needs practice, practice, practice. So every time we're going out to, say, practice our dressage, for example, then we want to go through our routine in practice as well. So you might notice there that I've said deliberate practice, practice, practice. So a lot of people just practice for the sake of practicing. We want to make our practices deliberate. We're working on something all the time, so make our practice deliberate. We want to use our routine each and every time you execute a skill at training and competition. This routine has been created for a reason because it works for you. Moments of difficulty are the most important times to adhere to the routine. Like I said before, those times we're not feeling so good. Even though we're feeling a little bit out of it mentally, we know that we've done these actions before, and when I did these actions before, I had a decent outcome. That's why we do it. Only make changes to a routine outside of competition. We don't change things on the day of competition, always in practice. Write your routine down, draw it, practice it, videotape it, keep a record of it. And the great thing about keeping a record of it is we have a bad day, we're thinking about what it is, what's gone wrong, and we can't really work it out. I've done a lot of work with softball, which is the sport that I came from, and a lot of the times when I'm working with somebody and they come back, we go through their routine as it's written, and that's what I'm not doing. So they work out exactly where things have gone wrong, and they can implement it again, and that can help with their anxiety too. So we've covered routines there pretty quickly. It's amazing how important routines are. There was a study done at the Olympic Games where athletes that didn't have routines didn't get into any finals or win any medals. Those who had routines won medals. Then another study showed that of those who won medals, it was the athletes who stuck to their routine at the Olympics that won the gold medals. Those who had routines and went away from their routines didn't win the medals. So that's how important they are.
We actually have a couple of questions on the routines.
Sure.
So I'll ask both of them because I think they kind of will both have a similar answer, but with some slightly different aspects. So the first question is, can you give a really specific example of a routine? And the second one is there a way to develop routines that are continuous? Equestrian events often have no definitive start time. Sometimes you can be asked to go in early, other times you can be waiting for an extended period of time. Okay, so I'll try to give my best example for equestrian, keeping in mind that it's not a sport that I'm greatly familiar with. But if I think about waiting, I was talking to a young athlete who is an equestrian rider who came to see me the other day, and between warm-up and getting into a dressage arena, they do warm-up great, they train great, they come to the arena, they've addressed the judges, and they're sitting on their horse waiting for the last competitor to finish, and they're about to go in. I think this is a perfect place where we could implement a routine. So what is my transition from warm-up? And I think that even it would start in warm-up. How do I warm my horse up? Do I warm my horse up the same every single time? Do I do something different every single time? And I'd be asking why we do something different every time. If we know how to warm the horse up, then I think we should go through the same routine every single time. We're trying to get ourselves focused for that competition. It might even start in saddling the horse.
doing it the same way, starting to focus my mind to what I'm about to do. So I would go through a routine, for example, where I would do exactly the same warm-up every single time to get the horse ready, and then how I work myself from that warm-up over to the dressage arena, how I approach the judges, what I'm thinking about at that particular time. I know I'm not being specific here, but it would be different for every single athlete. So what am I thinking? We're going to talk about self-talk next. What am I saying to myself? And rather than leaving it to chance, building something in that I'm saying to myself that is very specific. You can do this. You've got this. Had a great warm-up. Let's go. Where's my focus? Am I looking around, looking for mum and dad, or starting to worry about someone's not here? Or do I have my focus in front of my horse? Am I saying things to my horse? What processes am I going through? Am I bringing in some diaphragmatic breathing just cause to help me to reduce my anxiety? How do I address the judges? Do I do it the same every single time? What's my way? Then once I've done that, I can sit there and start to, if there's some time between sitting there and waiting for the last competitor to finish, I can start going through some visualization and some imagery about what I'm about to do. We're going to get onto visualization and imagery soon, but what I would suggest is having a very positive imagery about what I'm about to do. So we might be sitting there, rather than sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, we are deliberately doing something that's putting us in the right frame of mind to perform well. So these are all the things that are in my control. And from what I can understand from my client and understanding dressage, for example, as an example, is that there are some specific time frames in there where we do a warm-up, we do transition, we do address the judges, we do wait. And then even when we enter the dressage arena, how we start, I think, is very, very important as well. So that would maybe be a start of another routine. How do I get started? How do I get the horse ready? So I could go on with that. Hopefully that's answered the question. Any indication, Christine?
No, but we do have another question.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if this might be something you cover a bit later on.
Sure.
But the question is that, so we've been talking about performing optimally, and there's a lot of things that are outside of the rider's control. So what about anxiety about horse, things like the horse independently behaving dangerously, or the rider being injured, anxiety following sudden unexpected injury, fear that something similar may happen again?
So what we're actually worried about there is falling off the horse. That's what's creating our anxiety, the potential of thing that hasn't happened yet and may not even happen. So you've talked there about the things that we can't control. We want to, and if we can't control something, then there's no point thinking about it. Easier said than done. Psychology is a lot easier than actually doing it. So it's a lot easier for me to express it, but we want to focus on what we can control. Seeing we're worried about falling off the horse and being anxious because of that, we haven't fallen off yet. We're still on the horse. What can I control while I'm on the horse? What calms this horse down? What gets this horse back in line? What tasks do I have to go through? What processes do I have to go through to ride this horse excellently? What standards do I have to meet? What processes? And that's the only thing we can control, and that's where I'd be encouraging you to put your focus. Right to move on, Christine? Hopefully that's answered those questions, or hopefully we'll get to a little bit more later on where we get to answer some of those questions a little bit better. So self-talk, what we're talking about with self-talk is, what do I tell myself? So we need to be aware and mindful of our self-talk. Is our self-talk positive or is it negative? Now, an example of negative self-talk is, don't screw up. That's negative self-talk. The human mind, the brain, as complex as it is, does not hear the word don't. And I'll give you all an example of this. So what I want you all to do, whatever you do, don't think of a pink elephant. So what you've probably all done then, when I've told you not to think about a pink elephant, you haven't heard the word don't, you've heard think of a pink elephant. So if I say to myself, don't screw up, what my brain is hearing is screw up, which is making me feel anxious. So we want to try and state something positively all the time. So positive would be, rather than don't screw up, would be do it well, do it excellently. That would be another positive way of putting it. When we're looking at our self-talk, we want to talk about instructional or motivational self-talk. When we're talking about instructional self-talk, what we're talking about there is how do I do it? Back straight, core on, hold on tight. They're very instructional type things to say to ourselves. Motivational is you've got this, I've got this, I can do it, I'm doing really well, I'm looking forward to doing it. That's more motivational self-talk. We want to have pre-prepared statements to go, so things that do work for us. Like I said, if we're sitting there and we're sitting there and we're sitting there for the last competitor to finish and we're starting to feel our anxiety, what are we telling ourselves? Have some pre-prepared statements ready to go that help us to stay in the present moment and stay positive. We also want to make sure that our self-talk is neutral and not anxiety producing. So we might say to ourselves, focus. When I was a softball pitcher, it was location rotation. So where I wanted the ball to go and what spin I wanted to put on the ball rather than explode, or a word like that. Because go or explode can, make you feel tense, and we're trying to stay away from that. Now, when we're starting to talk about focus, just as when we're talking about routines, focus is probably an hour webinar all in itself, so I'll try to summarize it the best I can. So what we're talking about in the high performance world of sport, of all the psychological constructs there are, attention is the most important construct. So the more specifically, our attentional focus and our attentional flexibility are the most important. And what we're talking about in attentional flexibility is, at the moment, I need to be focused on this. The next minute, well, now I've got to focus on this. Okay, so shift my focus, making sure that we are able to shift our focus to the most important things at the time. Say we're doing show jumping while we're not about to approach a jump. Maybe we're focused on in front of the horse. Maybe we're focused on the direction that we're heading. But as we start to head towards a jump, we start thinking about the processes that I need to get the horse to jump over this obstacle effectively. So we've shifted our attentional focus. We've been flexible with our focus. It is those athletes who can continuously attend or focus on the right things at the right time that excel. So if we are worried and we are focused on worrying about falling off, then we're not focused on the thing that's going to help us to perform excellently. Thinking about the things about how to control this horse, how to get this horse to perform how I want it to perform, these are better places for our focus to be. There I've just put up a quick diagram which I find really, really interesting, which kind of points out all the things that we need to have superior performance in sport. We talk about anxiety, confidence, we're talking about goals, talent, group dynamics, cultural factors, how well we practice, and it all comes down to how well we focus. And I just think this picture is amazing for pointing that out. Nothing happens if we're not focused effectively. So what does it mean to attend to the right things at the right time? The most important things at the right time can be influenced by anxiety, emotions, thoughts, external factors, the opposition, if we've got an opposition, other performers, the weather, the judges. The key result of paying attention to the right things at the right time is it allows the athlete to select the best response under the circumstances and execute that response accordingly. Just to try to pick an example out of the sky, we're approaching an obstacle on our horse and the horse isn't ready, we feel the horse isn't ready to make that jump, maybe we need to circle around. Maybe that's the best choice at the time. Forget multitasking, the battle of the sexes, who can multitask the best, forget it. Because if we're not giving ourselves 100% focus on what we're doing, we are splitting our focus and only giving each thing 2 things, 50-50. 3 things, 33-33-33. 4 things, 25-25-25. So we don't want to be multitasking. We want to be 100% focused on one thing at a time. So strategies for focusing attention, like I said, focus in itself is a very long presentation, but we want to have competition plans. Competition plans focus our attention. Have process goals. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? Say 3 things that I'm going to achieve that lead to me being able to get the horse to jump this jump. So I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to do that. They are my process goals for jumping the horse. Performance routines we've talked about. The 5 F's we're going to talk about a little bit later can help us to focus, and our self-talk is a really good one for helping us to focus as well. So instructional, once again, making sure it's positive, instructional and motivational with our self-talk. So I'm going to move on to diaphragmatic breathing. This is one that's very, very important. It's difficult because I probably can't teach it while we're here. I taught a client of mine today diaphragmatic breathing. It took half an hour to do it, show them how to use it, practice it, show them how to implement it. But generally, this is one of the most amazing natural things that we have to help us reduce our anxiety. And I teach it to the most distressed client that walks through my door, all the way through to the most elite athlete that walks through my door, and I use it on a daily basis myself. Even did a few just before we started the presentation. So diaphragmatic breathing. Breathing is the body's most natural and effective form of anxiety regulation. We're talking about oxygen here. We get oxygen, we need to think clearly. So we talked before about being anxious and not thinking so clearly. So we need the oxygen to get in so we can start to think more clearly. It fuels our muscles for performance as well, and also helps us in recovery. So oxygen helps us think clearly, fuels our muscles because we're in this anxious state, and it helps us to recover afterwards too. It gets rid of the CO2. It's a mindfulness technique. So I've put a bit more of an explanation of mindfulness in the handout, but basically mindfulness is about being in the present moment. That's what we're talking about with mindfulness. Big thing in psychology at the moment. So we want to try and stay in there. We've talked before about anxiety is always future oriented. We can't control the future. And distress, remorse, guilt, shame is always past emotions. So where we need to stay is right in the present moment, the best we possibly can. And that's by using mindfulness techniques. And the only way we can control the future is what we do right now. And that's why we want to be in the present moment. Also, diaphragmatic breathing, breathing with my tummy, keeps my center of gravity low. A lot of the times, someone says, take a deep breath, we all go, and our center of gravity goes higher. But also what's happened is I probably look quite tense to everybody. My shoulders have got tense, my neck's got tense, and my center of gravity has come higher. If I breathe, if I keep my shoulders low and breathe with my diaphragm, my shoulders stay low, my center of gravity stays low, my neck and shoulders have stayed nice and relaxed. And it minimises tension in our muscles, particularly the shoulders, as we've just discussed. So it's probably not a good diagram here, but what we're talking about is if this hand represents the ribs, my lungs sit behind my ribs, and my diaphragm sits underneath my lungs. So when I breathe in, the diaphragm pulls air into my lungs, and when I breathe out, the diaphragm pushes the air out of my lungs. So we want to try to learn to breathe with our tummy. So we can call it diaphragmatic breathing, we can call it controlled breathing, we can call it tummy breathing. I've heard it called skinny breathing because we might breathe out and make ourselves fat, and then breathe in to make ourselves skinny when we blow all the air out. So it's got a number of different names. Hopefully this diagram shows this person has say a little bit of a bulge in the belly because they've got all the air in there, they're breathing with their belly. And this one, which is the breathing out, shows them go skinny. So they've blown all the air out and their tummy is sucked in. So we want to talk about leading with our belly button out when we're breathing in, and then pulling the belly button back towards the chair when we're breathing out. Some people find it easier to learn when they're laying down like this. Once we've learned how to do it, we want to use a bit of a cycle like this, which is we want to breathe in, 2, 3, 4. So breathe across the whole 4 seconds. Big fat tummy, stretched muscles across my tummy. And then I want to hold it, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out across the whole 4 seconds till I'm completely empty, and then wait. So hold our breath, all our breath is out, and then wait, 2, 3, 4. That's what we call one cycle. And I often talk to people about using this in maintenance mode and management mode. Maintenance mode is I'm likely to feel anxious sometime during the day, so I'll do a little bit of breathing at regular intervals throughout the day just to keep my anxiety levels low. So if we think about it like a bucket, we've got the bucket full, one more drop, overflow. And that's a bit like our emotions. So we want to try to keep the water level down a little bit lower in the bucket so we have some capacity for things that come during the day. Drip, 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 drip. So we do our breathing through the day at regular intervals. The other one is, then we have an event, I'm on my horse, I'm feeling really anxious, right, I'm already triggered, I'm already in anxious mode, do my breathing. So we can use it for maintenance, just getting ourselves a lower level of anxiety throughout the day, And we can do it, okay, I'm triggered, I'm in that mode, I've been mindful, I've got myself into the position where I know that I need to do something about this, so I'll do my breathing. So some other tools that we have for regulating anxiety, those ones are our key ones. And we've got things like progressive muscle relaxation. So we've got our gorilla there, looks pretty relaxed, maybe he's been doing some PMR. So if we're doing PMR, we can do two things. We can either tense our muscles really tight for 3 seconds and then let it go, feel that nice relaxation, or we can simply lay on the floor like the gorilla here and think about a different body type as we go. So I usually start at my feet and maybe think about, visualize my feet melting into the carpet or into my bed or into the floor. And then maybe go to my ankles and then my calves, feeling those muscles really relax, using our mind to relax, relax, relax. So we work progressively down our body from head to toe or from toe up. Maybe we have some candles, some incense. You know, we're talking about really trying to relax here. This, we can use it on an event day, or we can use it when we're at home to relax, but generally what we might do in an event is tighten our muscles really tight and then let them go. Or be mindful, come into the moment, I'm sitting there about to go into the arena, yep, got a bit of a tight spot there, just relax it, just relax it, just relax it, let it go. So that's progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR. Just do a quick body scan, a little bit like PMR. We can stop for a moment and close your eyes. Start at the top of your head and work slowly down your body all the way to your feet. What do you feel in your body? Are there any tight spots? Is my neck a bit tight? Have I got my jaw clenched? Am I holding a fist? If so, if we've got tight spots, try to let it go. We can use PMR to let it go, or we can use our diaphragmatic breathing to breathe into the spot. So it's kind of metaphorically, when we breathe in, we take in all this air, think about the area itself that's tight expanding. So it's starting to let go. And then we breathe out, we're blowing all that tension and energy out of that muscle so we can relax it as we go. This is a mindfulness technique. By working through our body systematically, as well as when we do the progressive muscle relaxation, we're in the moment. That's the thing about diaphragmatic breathing, is we have to think to do it because it's not a natural way of breathing. So it gets us into the present moment, into the here and now. Visualization and imagery. Once again, this is something that's probably another half an hour, 45-minute presentation, but just quickly. We can build visualization. Once again, we're sitting there, we've addressed the judges, we're about to go into the dressage arena, we're sitting on the horse, picturing ourselves executing our skills excellently, doing each of the movements excellently. That's what we want to be thinking about. We want to, if we're about to do a show jump, we want to think about and watch ourselves going over that jump really, really well and effectively. So picturing ourselves doing things well can help us to get rid of anxiety. Focus on your processes when you're visualizing. What processes do I need to go through to execute this skill? Make sure you visualize yourself at normal speed. We have a bit of a humans have a bit of a way of doing things. We want to do it like slow motion replay on video. We want to try and visualize ourselves at normal speed because that's the way we're going to be doing it when we're out there. So if we're talking about imagery, once again, this is imagery is its own presentation in itself. But if we're going to have a bit of, to just introduce you a little bit to it, we have this PET-LEP model. So physical, we want to actually try to be in the place that we're going to perform the event. Even put our uniform on, put our helmet on, maybe even sitting on a fake horse or even sitting on our horse and do imagery. Once again, when we're doing imagery where the muscles aren't moving, but the brain is sending signals to the muscles that perform that activity, and therefore we can actually learn a skill from doing imagery. So just for a quick example, basketball, free throw shooting, have two groups who haven't practiced at all. One group is taken through imagery, the other one isn't. The ones who do imagery perform much better than the ones who don't. And that's something that's been proven over and over again in different sports. Environmental, we want to try to get ourselves into the exact place where we're going to be performing. We want to make it task relevant, so we want to imagine ourselves doing the exact tasks that we're going to be doing during our performance. Timing, once again, we want to be doing it at the speed that we'll be performing at it, none of the slow-mo stuff. Might be a little bit slow-mo while we're learning how to do imagery, but the better we get at it, the more it'll be sped up. We can use learning. If there's a skill, for example, that I'm trying to learn and I'm having trouble learning it, we can imagine ourselves doing it. Once again, the brain is sending messages to our muscles about how we do this skill. So we are actually getting some practice in it, even though we're not doing it physically. And we want to have the right emotion. So once again, we are anxious. We want to try to change in our imagery to a really positive feeling, a really energized feeling, motivated rather than anxious. So using imagery is a really good way of working on a more positive emotional approach to what we're doing. And the last one is perspective. So what we're talking about here is trying to do imagery as if we are doing it. So if we're talking about using a camera, for example, we're behind the camera. We're not watching ourselves from the stands. We're actually behind the camera doing the activity when we're doing the imagery. Other things like, say, dancing, ballet, they tend to have an outward perspective, so they watch themselves like a crowd would or an audience would. But for us, we probably want to be internal. And just thinking about it, probably in something like dressage, which is about form, we might want to do a little bit of both. We might want to watch ourselves as if we're in the stands and the horse, and we might want to, just as we're about to perform, we probably want to do it from an internal perspective. A pleasant thought is a good way to work on this. So a pleasant thought, we're anxious, we're catastrophizing, we're ruminating on all the things that can go wrong. Sort of want to shake our head and have something positive to think about, a pleasant thought. A lot of people talk about being on a beach. We want to make sure that we've practiced these thoughts before we get out into the arena. We don't want to leave anything to chance. So practice them at practice them at home. Does it actually have the effect that I'm looking for? Does it pull me out of my anxiety or my distress? And when we're doing this, once again, with all mindfulness, we want to use our 5 senses. What does it feel like to be on this beach? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Can I feel the sand between my toes? Can I feel the wind on my face? Is it crashing waves or is it really quite calm? These are all the things that we want to think about. Pleasant event scheduling, I've put a lot more in your presentation, in the handout tomorrow on pleasant event scheduling. What this is about is rewarding ourselves for effort rather than what a lot of us do. We're all brought up in families where we get rewarded for success, punished for failure, or we have reward taken away if we fail. That creates a lot of anxiety. Getting back to that outcome stuff we talked about at the start, worrying about outcome creates anxiety. So what I want to do is I want to focus on scheduling an event post the anxiety-producing event. So if I've got, a lot of the times what I talk about is when I'm doing an exam. We can talk about I'm going to go out and perform on my horse. There's an event at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm really anxious about it. So at 4 o'clock, I'll schedule in something pleasant. So we want to plan it before the event, and no matter what the outcome of the event is, we still want to follow through with doing our pleasant activity, rewarding ourselves for the effort. It teaches us that this is not the end of the world if this doesn't go well. Life is going to go on. There is something to look forward to. So it has the ability to reduce our anxiety when we're coming up to this thing that might look like the end of the world if I don't do well here. So you want to plan it before the event. Some of the things you might think about is having a nice meal, going and seeing a movie, having an ice cream, or going to see a friend. So these are all the things that can be pleasant activities. And I've also put that in the handout, some lines there where people can fill out things that they find really pleasant activities to follow through on. This is a really good one for weight loss and going to the gym and exercise as well. Music is a great way to regulate emotion. Once again, this one's probably a longer presentation as well, but there's a lot of research gone into the power of music and how it can regulate our emotion. So we talked about music before to pump us up if we're underactivated, we're not really feeling like it today. So we can use music to pump us up, but we can also use it to calm us down. So we want to be mindful of when we're using our music. Are we doing it in our personal time? Is it appropriate to have our headphones on at this stage, or is it team time, the coach is talking to me, or we're addressing a judge or something like that? So but that's something to keep in mind. We want to pre-select our music. We want to make sure that it works for us. We don't want to leave anything to chance. So we don't want to get to competition day and throw on any old song and hope that it regulates our emotion. We want to work on it beforehand and make sure it actually does the thing that we're hoping it will do, i.e. reducing our anxiety, calming us down. We can even use music to help us to focus if we get the right song. Ensure it is calming if that's what you're going for. Be mindful of lyrics. It's a bit of a trick for young players, is we might have this really great song that we listen to, but the lyrics are all negative. There's one by Eminem, Lose Yourself. He's talking in there about being anxious, about throwing up and not being able to perform on stage. So even though it's got this really hardcore music that might pump us up, the lyrics are really self-defeating and making us feel maybe a little bit more anxious. So we want to be really mindful of the lyrics as well. Have about 6 songs in your playlist as well. And the other thing to keep in mind is that music will wear off like anything else over time. So make sure we update our playlists regularly. Worry time. Worry time is a strategy for overcoming worries. And what we're trying to do here is assign a certain time of the day where we're going to worry about our worries. So I've got up, I've got to the equestrian event, I'm about to get on my horse and do the warm-up, and I remember I haven't paid that bill. Yes, it's going to cause us anxiety if we continue to ruminate on it. Is there anything we can do about it now? No. Thinking about it, is it going to help my performance? No. So what we might do is just assign it to worry time. Okay, I've got to pay my bill, 5:30 this afternoon, I'll pay that bill. So we can use this as an overall anxiety technique, or maybe when we're at the arena, we might want to use a pad or an iPhone or some other device to type in our list of worries as they arise. I'm worried about the exam I've got on Monday. I'm worried about the interview I've got on Tuesday. I've got to pay that bill today. Just write it down. It's amazing the power of writing something down, and it starts to leave our thoughts once we've got a record of it. Then what we want to do is set aside 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, and that is the only time in the day we're going to allow ourselves to worry. And during that time, say I've set my worry time for 5:30 to 6, it's a time when I can actively approach my problems, think about listing them down, prioritizing them, strategizing to overcome them, scheduling them, and that's where I work on my problems, and that's the only time I allow myself to ruminate and stay focused on my worries. It's a nice way to help us with our anxiety. The 5 Fs, this is usually a longer presentation as well. We're starting to run a little bit out of time, so I'll get through the 5 Fs. What we're talking about here is a structured way of working through having made a mistake. A lot of the time we make a mistake, we ruminate on it, and it starts to affect our focus and it starts to affect our future performances. So we always want to keep in mind that once something bad has happened or we've made a mistake, we can't control it any longer. But what we can control is what we do next, and that's what we can do here. So here's an active process for working through errors. First of all, if we're in the middle of something, we're in the middle of a dressage event, we're in the middle of a show jumping event or eventing, we need to finish. We can't just stop and start again. We can't just stop and give up. We need to finish first. Once we've finished, we might be feeling a little bit of frustration, and we might want to just get rid of that frustration. But what I'm saying to you is you have 2 seconds to get rid of it. So maybe we use F words such as far out or phooey or any other permutation of that. Get it out, punch our hand, whatever the case may be. Stamp our feet. Get rid of the frustration as quickly as you possibly can. Then we start moving through. So fix. Okay, I did something wrong there. What's one thing I can do next time to give myself the greatest opportunity for A, not making that mistake again, and B, being successful in my performance next time? So what's one thing I can fix? Now we're starting to get back onto the next task. We need to be able to forgive ourselves and forget that we made a mistake. Maybe we need to forgive somebody else for having made a mistake that's led to a bad outcome for us. So we need to be able to let it go. And the last one is particularly if we're continuing to perform, we need to focus and refocus. Remembering that focus is the most important thing, we've got to get back to it. Rather than ruminating on the thing we did wrong, focus on the things that we can control now. Very, very important. Cognitive reframing, we'll just rush through this one a little bit. We want to challenge our thoughts. If we're thinking negatively, we want to get back to positively. So if we find ourselves getting anxious, we find ourselves drifting off to things that are catastrophizing and ruminating, start saying to yourself, start thinking about your thoughts. This is a mindfulness technique as well. Is what I'm thinking realistic? If it's not, change it. You know, I may have had a fall off a horse before. I may have had a couple of falls off a horse. But I've ridden a horse 1,000 times and I've only fallen off 3 times. So the chances of me falling off this time are very, very slim. So maybe it's not so realistic to think that I'm going to fall off my horse. Is what I'm thinking positive? If not, change it. If I'm in my negative self-talk, change it to positive self-talk. Is there another way to think about this situation? Oh my God, I can't. This is a really hard course. What am I going to do? Well, hang on. What am I going to do? Maybe I find a map of it. Maybe I go and ride it the day before. Maybe I walk it. Some of the F1 drivers, the top drivers in the world, they will roller skate or blade around the race courses before they even drive them. There's another way to think about it. Change it. If what you're thinking helpful, if it's not, change it. That's cognitive reframing. So this is the last bit here. So some further tools for regulating my anxiety. And once again, these are tools and we could go on and on and on, but contingency planning. What if this goes wrong? So a lot of us, we've talked about not thinking about the negative, but we put ourselves into, say, worry time. What are all the things that could go wrong tomorrow? Oh, I could leave my saddle home. What if I leave my saddle home? What if I leave my boots home? What if it's raining? What if there's a judge there I don't like? Put some contingencies in place, how I'm going to deal with this ahead of time. And a lot of people think, oh, well, isn't that thinking negatively? And I say no. If you look at tactical teams, they always have contingency plans. We have a plan A, a plan B, plan C, plan D. Plan A doesn't work, we're ready with plan B. We're not sitting around going, what do I do now? So it gets very anxiety producing when something goes wrong. We'll reduce our anxiety when we know what to do if something goes wrong. Give you an example. An Australian rugby team went to South Korea and they're all ready to go. They're going to their hotel room. They get to the hotel, no dramas. No dramas whatsoever. Rooms are on the 6th floor. Realise that the hotel doesn't have any lifts. That should be fine in general. However, it was a wheelchair rugby team. So contingencies, things can go wrong. So we want to incorporate other mental skills techniques. We've only used a couple of them tonight, and very specifically for anxiety reduction. We can use them for other things as well, like how to get focused properly, how to think positively about what I'm doing. A lot of the time when we get anxious, we speed everything up. Everything gets sped up. We feel rushed. We feel pushed by people. We want to slow down, take our time, control things. So as soon as we start feeling anxious, one of the things we might want to do is slow down. We also want to come prepared with a good game plan or strategy, and we want to stick to it. So a lot of people, they get anxious, they go away from their routine, they go away from their game plan, they go away to the things that have worked for them before. It seems crazy, but we all do it. So come prepared with a plan or a strategy and stick to it. So hopefully after we've implemented all of these anxiety regulation techniques, we might feel a little bit like Mr. Frog here, nice and relaxed, ready to perform. So tonight we've looked at what is sports psychology. So I just want to try and give those who haven't had access to sports psychology before a little bit of an insight as to what we do. It was a very short introduction. We've talked about understanding anxiety, what brings it on around performance, and then hopefully I've been able to show you a number of anxiety management tools to help you with your anxiety in performance. Generally, if we are focused on the right things at the right time, we have our processes and our standards in place about how we're going to perform. We have our game plan. We're saying all the right things in our mind, and we put it all together in a really good routine, and we're really stuck into it. Our anxiety won't interfere with our performance. And even if we do feel anxious, our body is going into that natural flow of executing my skills because I've put everything in place to give myself the greatest opportunity for success. Not guaranteed success, the greatest opportunity for success. And that's it for today. So I think we might have some questions, Christine?
Yeah, so we've just got a few more questions. So a couple from a couple of parents, first of all. So this lady's daughter says she gets frustrated, not anxious. Is there really a difference?
I think there is. Anxiety is probably where we're a little bit more worried, where frustration is probably a little bit more anger. What I generally find in people who are feeling frustrated is they get quite tense. because they're angry. So we might hang on to the reins tighter. We might squeeze the horse with our feet and our knees a little bit tighter. Whereas anxiety, we might not actually take enough control of the horse. So I think with frustration, I'd be definitely looking at some of the things about trying to get the athlete refocused when they start to get frustrated. They've got no chance once they've got to that point. So once we're at that point, using things like tools to get us back focused. If I'm frustrated, what am I saying to myself? Trying to see, I'm probably thinking something negative. So how can I get myself back into something positive? And the diaphragmatic breathing is excellent for frustration.
Another one, which is, again, it's about a daughter, but I think it's something that anybody who rides horses can relate to. So a new horse, can they get some tips on how to make the transition as smooth as possible when transitioning onto a new horse that you're then going to be competing on? Okay, so you and I talked about this one a little bit today. Probably what we talked about was spending a lot of time with the horse, getting a coach in to help with that sort of thing. People who are very experienced with horses. I think that any of the techniques that we've used tonight can help us. We need to spend some time on the horse. We need to do things deliberately when we're practicing, deliberate practice. What is it that I want to teach the horse today? What is it that I want to work on with the horse today? Making each time I get on the horse very, very specific rather than just for the sake of it. And they're the mental skills that I would use. Getting the horse used to your routines, I think would be very, very valuable. How you get on the horse, what you say to the horse, when you say it, how you react to difficult situations. I think these are all the things that we can focus on to help us build a relationship with the horse so the horse gets to know us as much as we get to know the horse. And finally, and I think you might have answered this just after this question came through, but when an equestrian athlete visualises themselves executing the skill excellently, should they picture themselves on top of the horse or what the horse will look like performing from the ground? I would say being on the horse as if you are on the horse doing it. So we want that internal perspective, like we're holding the video camera. So I think what you're sort of talking about there, we sort of got two perspectives. We've got, looking out. I talk about it from behind the eyes or in front of the eyes. So we want to visualize everything. So being on the horse and rider as one, doing it from your perspective of being on top of the horse from behind your eyes, so the information's coming in and being processed in the brain. The other perspective would be as if you're sitting in the stand. So I think we should be visualizing and using imagery as if we're on the horse doing it. Hope that makes sense. Did that make sense to you, Christine? Yep. And that's it, I think, for our questions. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'll hand over to Christine now to finalise everything. You've got my contact details there. If anybody wants to do any one-on-one work, I'm more than happy to do so. And I hope you've all got something out of this. And you got my email address there. Please feel free to send through any other questions that you might have. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you found that helpful. Thank you, Damien. That was really great to listen to. I'm sure it's something that everybody can take some things away from. So the handout will be sent out to you all tomorrow, and hopefully the video presentation will be ready tomorrow. If not, it'll be ready early next week. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll sign off now.